Jake Martinez stared at his laptop screen through bloodshot eyes, wondering if the fourth energy drink of the morning was finally going to kill him. The genetics lab report cursor blinked mockingly at him, taunting his procrastination skills that had reached legendary status even by college senior standards. "Come on, Jake," he muttered, pushing aside a tower of empty ramen cups. "Just sequence something. Anything. A houseplant. Your roommate's moldy sandwich. Whatever." Jay. His lab partner Lisa had already submitted her assignment 3 days ago, because apparently some people actually had their lives together. Meanwhile, Jake was sitting here at 11 p.m. on the due date, frantically trying to remember how the PCR machine worked. That's when inspiration struck. Or maybe it was the caffeine-induced delirium. "Why not sequence my own DNA?" he asked his reflection in the black laptop screen. "I mean, how hard could it be? I've got plenty of the stuff just lying around." 20 minutes later, Jake was back in the empty genetics lab, swabbing the inside of his cheek like he was solving a murder case. The building was eerily quiet, just him and the humming of expensive equipment that he definitely wasn't qualified to operate unsupervised. "Okay, DNA extraction kit," he mumbled, reading the instructions for the 5th time. "Step 1. Don't contaminate everything. Step 2. Try not to blow up the lab. Step 3. Pray to whatever deity oversees underachieving college students." The extraction went surprisingly smoothly, probably because Jake was too tired to mess it up properly. He loaded his sample into the sequencing machine, punched in some parameters that looked reasonable, and settled in for the 6-hour wait with his 5th energy drink and a bag of stale chips. He must have dozed off, because the next thing he knew, the machine was beeping insistently. Jake stumbled over to check the results, expecting to see the familiar human genome sequence he'd memorized for exams. Instead, the screen showed something that made him question whether he'd accidentally ingested hallucinogens instead of caffeine. "Unknown sequences detected," the computer cheerfully announced. "No matches found in terrestrial databases. Genetic markers indicate non-human origin. Please consult your advisor immediately." Jake stared at the screen, then at his hands, then back at the screen. "Well," he said to the empty lab, "that's not supposed to happen." He ran the sequence again. Same result. Then a 3rd time. Because clearly the machine was broken, right? But no, there it was in black and white in terrifying detail. His DNA contained sequences that didn't exist anywhere on Earth. "Okay, Jake," he said, starting to pace around the lab like a caged animal hopped up on energy drinks. "Let's think about this logically. Either you've discovered that you're some kind of mutant, or you've contaminated your sample with something really weird, or..." He couldn't finish that thought, because the 3rd option was too ridiculous to consider. Nobody was actually part alien. That was the stuff of bad science fiction movies and conspiracy theories. His phone buzzed with a text from Lisa. "How's the last-minute panic going? Need help?" Jake stared at the message, then at the computer screen showing his impossible results. How exactly was he supposed to explain this? "Hey Lisa, turns out I'm not entirely human. Want to grab coffee and discuss the implications for my student loans?" Instead, he typed back, "Everything's fine. Totally normal genetics lab experience happening here." The computer beeped again. New text appeared, anomalous genetic signature detected. Initiating emergency protocols. Please remain calm. "Emergency protocols?" Jake said aloud. "What emergency protocols?" "I just wanted to sequence some DNA, not trigger some kind of biological alarm system." But the damage was done. Somewhere in the vast network of computers that connected the world, Jake Martinez had just announced to the universe that he wasn't exactly what he appeared to be. And apparently the universe had been waiting for that announcement for a very long time. Jake spent the rest of the night staring at his ceiling, trying to convince himself that genetic sequencing machines could malfunction in spectacularly weird ways. By morning, he'd almost succeeded in rationalizing the whole thing as a caffeine-induced hallucination. That delusion lasted exactly until someone knocked on his apartment door at 7 a.m. Go away, Jake called from his couch, where he'd been attempting to sleep off his existential crisis. If you're here about the rent, I'll have it next week. If you're here about the noise complaint, that wasn't me. If you're here about anything else, I'm dead. The knocking continued, accompanied by a voice that sounded like it was being filtered through a computer. Jake Martinez, this is Commander Vex Thornfield of the Galactic Census Bureau. We need to talk. Jake sat up so fast he nearly fell off the couch. The what now? Galactic Census Bureau. Think of us as the cosmic equivalent of the DMV, except with more interdimensional paperwork and significantly worse customer service. I'm sorry, did you just say galactic? Open the door, Mr. Martinez. We've been monitoring your genetic signature since you triggered our sensors last night. Congratulations, you've just become the most interesting human on Earth. Jake shuffled to the door, still wearing yesterday's clothes and sporting what he was pretty sure was the worst case of bedhead in human history. He peered through the peephole and saw a perfectly normal-looking person in a business suit. You don't look very alien, he said through the door. Holographic projection. The real me would give you nightmares and possibly cause you to question your life choices even more than you already do. Fair point. Jake opened the door. So, Commander Vex Thornfield? And before you ask, yes, I'm really an alien. No, I'm not here to probe you. Yes, this is as annoying for me as it is for you. The figure that looked like a tired government employee stepped into Jake's disaster of an apartment, glanced around with what could only be described as professional disappointment, and sighed. Let me guess, Vex continued, you sequenced your own DNA for a class project, got some weird results, and now you're wondering if you've lost your mind. That's surprisingly accurate. Mr. Martinez, what I'm about to tell you is going to sound insane, but I need you to listen carefully because, frankly, I have 17 other cases to handle today, and I'd like to get through this with minimal drama. Jake gestured to his couch, which was currently occupied by 3 days' worth of laundry. Please, make yourself comfortable in my palace of academic failure. Vex remained standing. Earth is not humanity's home planet. You're all descendants of refugees from a failed research colony. The humans who settled here 10,000 years ago were actually a collection of genetic experiments that escaped from a laboratory facility. Jake blinked. I'm sorry, what? Think of it as the galaxy's most successful prison break, except instead of criminals, it was test subjects. Your ancestors were created by combining DNA from dozens of different species to see what would happen. And what did happen? You happened. Humans. The galaxy's most chaotic, unpredictable, and inadvertently successful species. You were supposed to be docile research subjects. Instead, you became, well, you. Jake looked around his apartment, taking in the towers of empty energy drink cans, the pile of unfinished homework, and the suspicious stain on the carpet that he'd been ignoring for 3 months. So you're telling me that this, he gestured broadly at his life, is the result of advanced genetic engineering? I'm afraid so. And here's the really fun part, you, specifically, just triggered a genetic alarm that's been dormant for 10 millennia. According to our readings, you're 0.3% original human. The rest of you is a cocktail of DNA from 47 different alien species. 47? 47. Including some species that went extinct before your planet had multicellular life. Congratulations, Mr. Martinez, you're basically a walking genetic museum. Jake sat down heavily on his couch, displacing a textbook and what might have been a sandwich from last week. So what happens now? Vex's holographic form flickered slightly. Now we have to figure out what to do with you. Because your little late-night science experiment just announced to every intelligence agency in the galaxy that the lost human colony has finally produced someone with an active genetic signature. Is that bad? Well, let's see. There are currently 43 different species with claims on human genetic material, 18 governments that consider your existence a violation of various treaties, and at least 6 research institutions that would love to dissect you for science. Jake stared at the alien projection. But on the bright side? On the bright side, you're about to become the most important person on a planet that doesn't officially exist. Assuming, of course, that we can keep you alive long enough to figure out what that means. Jake reached for his 6th energy drink of the day. You know what? I was worried this Tuesday was going to be boring. The Galactic Census Bureau's local office was located in a strip mall between a nail salon and a store that claimed to sell universal phone accessories. Jake had walked past it hundreds of times and always assumed it was some kind of tax preparation service. "This is it?" he asked, staring at the grimy glass door with its faded sign reading Interdimensional Services, Walk-ins Welcome. "Budget cuts," Vex explained, still in holographic human form. The Galactic Council decided that prime real estate was wasted on bureaucracy. Apparently, they've never met bureaucracy. Inside, the office looked exactly like every DMV Jake had ever been forced to visit, except the mosaic had a distinctly alien warble to it, and the magazines were in languages that hurt to look at directly. Behind the reception desk sat what appeared to be a 7-foot-tall blue penguin wearing a tie and a name tag that read hello. "My name is Blorg Whistlebottom, Senior Processing Specialist." "Oh good," Blorg said in a voice like a deflating balloon. "Another genetic anomaly. Just what I needed to make my quota this millennium." "Blorg here is going to help us navigate the paperwork," Vex said with the tone of someone who had long since given up hope of anything going smoothly. "Paperwork?" Jake asked. "Oh, so much paperwork," Blorg sighed, pulling out a stack of forms that seemed to exist in more dimensions than Jake was comfortable with. "First, we need to establish your legal status. Are you a runaway experiment, an illegal genetic construct, or a sovereign biological entity?" "I was hoping for college student." "Not an option, I'm afraid. The Galactic Council recognizes only 17 categories of intelligent life, and sleep-deprived humans surviving on caffeine and regret isn't one of them." Vex leaned against the desk. "What's the problem, Blorg? Just file him under miscellaneous." "Can't do it. His genetic signature violates 847 different treaties. Did you know that Zephyrian DNA is still considered a controlled substance in this sector? And don't get me started on the Tiberian genetic markers. Those have been banned for good reason." "What reason?" Jake asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. "The last time someone with active Tiberian genes sneezed, it accidentally terraformed a moon." Jake looked down at his hands as if they might start glowing at any moment. "So what you're telling me is that I'm basically a walking biological weapon?" "More like a walking biological question mark," Blorg corrected. "We're not sure what you're capable of. That's what makes this so exciting. And by exciting, I mean grounds for immediate deportation to 17 different quarantine facilities." Vex's hologram flickered with what Jake was beginning to recognize as the alien equivalent of a headache. "There has to be something we can do. What about humanitarian exceptions? Do humans qualify for humanitarian status?" Blorg asked, genuinely curious. "I mean, technically, they're experimental constructs. The paperwork gets very fuzzy when it comes to artificial species with naturally evolved rights." "Artificial species?" Jake's voice cracked slightly. "I prefer premium genetic blend. Thank you very much." That's when the office door chimed, and 3 more figures walked in. These weren't bothering with holographic disguises. The first looked like a cross between a praying mantis and a tax attorney. The second appeared to be made entirely of crystallized anxiety. The third was, actually, Jake couldn't look directly at the third one without feeling the urge to apologize for things he hadn't done yet. "Martinez? Jake Martinez?" the mantis lawyer asked in a voice like rustling papers. "You're served." "Served with what?" 43 separate legal notices claiming ownership of various portions of your genetic material. Congratulations, you're the defendant in what's likely to become the galaxy's most complicated custody battle. The anxiety crystal pulsed nervously. "We're also here to inform you that 6 different research institutions have filed claims for exclusive study rights to your DNA. And by study, they mean the kind of study that typically doesn't leave the subject in a condition to complain about the findings. Jake looked at Vex, then at Blorg, then at the increasingly crowded office full of beings that definitely hadn't been covered in his anthropology classes. "You know what's funny?" Jake said, reaching for the energy drink he always kept in his backpack. "Yesterday, my biggest problem was remembering to do laundry. Now I'm apparently the most wanted organism in the galaxy." "Technically," Blorg corrected, "you're the most disputed organism. Wanted implies that people want you alive." Jake took a long sip of his energy drink, noting that the various aliens in the room seemed to watch the action with fascination. "Is there something special about that beverage?" the Mantis lawyer asked. "It's just caffeine and regret," Jake replied. "Why?" "One battle." "Because," Vex said slowly, "most species can't process that level of stimulants without going into toxic shock. But you just drank what would probably kill a Zephyrian." Jake looked at the can in his hand, then at the room full of aliens staring at him like he'd just performed magic. "Oh," he said. "So that's probably not normal, is it?" 3 days later, Jake found himself in the most surreal situation of his life, which was saying something considering his life had recently included learning he was part alien and being served legal papers by a crystallized anxiety attack. He was sitting in his genetics lab after hours, except now it was functioning as the unofficial headquarters for what Vex had started calling the Coalition for Human Existence, which sounded way more impressive than 3 college students and some increasingly stressed aliens trying to figure out why everyone wants to dissect Jake. "Okay, let me get this straight," Lisa said, adjusting her glasses as she read from Blorg's dimensional paperwork. "According to these documents, humans aren't supposed to be able to survive on 3 hours of sleep, consume their body weight in caffeine daily, or eat nothing but processed carbohydrates for weeks at a time. But we do all that stuff," Jake pointed out, cracking open his morning energy drink. "I mean, it's basically the college experience." "That's the problem," Vex explained, their hologram flickering between human appearance and something that looked like an octopus made of starlight. "What you consider normal human behavior is actually a collection of biological impossibilities." Blorg, who had been reluctantly drafted into their cause mostly because he wanted to go home to his family, waved a flipper at the genetic readouts covering the lab benches. "Your species shouldn't exist. According to every biological model in the galaxy, humans should have died out within a generation. You're too chaotic, too adaptable, too improvisational." "I'll take that as a compliment," Jake said. "It's not meant as one. Do you realize that your brain chemistry changes in response to stress in ways that would kill most other species? And instead of dying, you just get more creative?" Lisa looked up from her laptop, where she'd been cross-referencing alien biology databases that she definitely wasn't supposed to have access to. "Wait, Jake, remember when you pulled that all-nighter last semester and solved Professor Wang's bonus problem that had been stumping graduate students for months?" "Yeah, I was running on pure panic and energy drinks." "Why?" "Wonder why?" "Because," Vex said slowly, "panic and stimulants create a neurochemical state that most species use only in life or death situations. You use it to do homework." "Good homework, apparently," Jake muttered. That's when it hit them. The reason Jake's genetic signature had triggered alarms across the galaxy wasn't because he was some kind of experimental subject gone wrong. It was because he was exactly what he was supposed to be. "We've been thinking about this backwards," Lisa said, standing up so quickly she knocked over a beaker of harmless buffer solution. "What if humans weren't the experiments? What if humans were the experimenters?" The room went very quiet. Even Blorg stopped shuffling papers. "Explain," Vex said. Lisa started pacing, which Jake recognized as her "I'm about to blow your mind with science" mode. "Look at the genetic markers. 47 different species, right? But they're not random. They're curated, like someone was collecting the best traits from each species and combining them. Someone who understood genetics better than any civilization currently in the galaxy," Jake added, following her logic. "Someone who could take the Zephyrian ability to process toxins, the Tiberian environmental adaptation, the Crystallian regeneration factors, and blend them into something that could not only survive, but thrive. X's holograms solidified as they processed this information. You're suggesting that humans were the scientists who created all the other species we've been talking about? I'm suggesting, Lisa said, that humans were the scientists who created all the other species in the galaxy. And then something happened. War, disaster, political upheaval. The human scientists had to evacuate, but they couldn't take their work with them. So they did the next best thing. They became their own experiment, Jake finished. They modified themselves to survive on a hostile planet with limited resources, gave themselves the ability to adapt to anything, and then forgot. Blorg made a sound like a deflating balloon filled with existential dread. Do you realize what you're suggesting? If humans are the predecessors, the mythical species that seeded the galaxy with intelligent life, then every government in known space is going to want to either worship you or dissect you for your secrets. Probably both, Vex added helpfully. Jake looked around the lab at his friends who had somehow become his allies in the strangest cause ever, at the evidence scattered across the benches that suggested his entire species had forgotten they were once the galaxy's greatest civilization. So, he said, what you're telling me is that my ability to survive on energy drinks and spite isn't just a quirky human trait. It's actually advanced genetic engineering designed to create the ultimate survivor species. That's exactly what we're telling you, Lisa said. And now I have to somehow prove this to a galaxy full of aliens who want to claim ownership of my DNA. Also exactly what we're telling you. Jake finished his energy drink and looked at his reflection in the empty can. You know what? I've had worse Tuesdays. The Galactic High Court looked exactly like what would happen if the United Nations building had a baby with a Las Vegas casino and raised it on a steady diet of bureaucratic nightmares and cosmic disappointment. Jake stood in what could generously be called the defendant's booth, which was really more like a glass cage designed to contain beings who might accidentally destroy the courtroom with their biological functions. Around him, the amphitheater-style courtroom buzzed with the sounds of 47 different species all trying to talk at once. This is fine, Jake muttered to himself. Just a casual Tuesday morning trial to determine the fate of humanity. No pressure. The judge, who appeared to be some kind of living coral reef wearing robes and an expression of profound irritation, called for order by releasing a sound that felt like being hugged by a foghorn. We are here, the judge announced in a voice like grinding tectonic plates, to determine the legal status of the entity known as Jake Martinez, and by extension, the species claiming to be human. Will the prosecution please state their case? The lead prosecutor was the mantis lawyer Jake had met at the Census Bureau, except now they were wearing what appeared to be the galactic equivalent of a power suit. Your Honor, the mantis began, the defendant represents an illegal genetic construct created in violation of the Sapient Rights Accords, the Biological Weapons Treaty, and the Cosmic Health and Safety Standards. We demand that all specimens of this so-called human species be remanded to appropriate research facilities for proper study and disposal. Disposal? Jake called out. That seems a bit extreme. What about relocation? Deportation? Community service? The judge's choral formation shifted in what might have been amusement. The defendant will remain silent unless called upon to demonstrate their species' alleged capabilities. That's when Vex, who was serving as Jake's legal representation despite having no qualifications other than knows the most about human weirdness, stood up. Your Honor, Vex said, we're prepared to prove that humans are not illegal constructs, but rather the lost predecessor species, the civilization that originally seeded the galaxy with intelligent life. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Half the species present started arguing with the other half, while several representatives began what appeared to be the galactic equivalent of a Twitter feud, except with more tentacles and death threats. Order. The judge commanded. This is an extraordinary claim. What evidence do you present? Lisa, who had been declared Jake's cultural attach despite being a 22-year-old genetics student, stepped forward with a tablet full of data. Your Honor, genetic analysis shows that defendant Martinez contains DNA markers from precisely the same 47 species that form the current Galactic Council. The probability of this occurring naturally is approximately 1 in 10 to the 437th power. Furthermore, Lisa continued, getting into her stride, that human behavioral patterns demonstrate problem-solving capabilities that exceed any known species when operating under extreme stress, sleep deprivation, and chemical stimulation. We're prepared to demonstrate, Vex added. The judge's choral formations rippled with what Jake hoped was curiosity rather than hunger. Very well. Defendant Martinez, you will be presented with a series of challenges designed to test your species' alleged capabilities. What followed was the strangest hour of Jake's life, which was really saying something at this point. First, they presented him with a logic puzzle that had stumped Galactic Council mathematicians for 5,000 years. Jake solved it in 17 minutes while drinking his 8th energy drink of the day and complaining about how hungry he was. Then they gave him a broken piece of technology from an extinct civilization and asked him to figure out how it worked. Jake took it apart, rebuilt it using components from his backpack, 3 paper clips, and what appeared to be alien duct tape, and somehow turned it into a device that played what sounded like the galaxy's most annoying pop song. I think it's a music player, Jake announced. Really bad music player. For the final test, they presented him with a diplomatic crisis that had been causing interstellar tensions for decades. Jake listened to both sides argue for about 10 minutes, then suggested they solve it with what he called the ancient human art of rock, paper, scissors. Best 2 out of 3. It worked. The courtroom fell silent as the judge processed what they had just witnessed. The defendant, the judge finally said, has demonstrated problem-solving capabilities that are unprecedented. Furthermore, the genetic evidence suggests that humans may indeed be the lost predecessor species. Jake raised his hand. Does this mean I can go home and finish my genetics paper? Because it's still due tomorrow, and this whole thing started because I was procrastinating. Mr. Martinez, the judge said, you've just solved 3 of the galaxy's oldest mysteries while running on caffeine and what appears to be spite. I think your academic career is the least of our concerns. But I still need to graduate, Jake pointed out. Student loans don't pay themselves. And that, somehow, was the moment that convinced the Galactic High Court that humans definitely were the predecessor species. Because only the civilization that had created the galaxy would worry about student loans in the middle of a cosmic tribunal. 3 months later, Jake sat in what used to be his apartment but was now officially designated as Earth's first galactic embassy. Which sounded impressive until you realized it was still the same studio apartment with the suspicious carpet stain. Except now it had a diplomatic immunity plaque next to the door. So let me see if I understand this correctly, Jake said, reading from the official document that had arrived that morning. Humanity has been granted elder species status, which comes with a seat on the Galactic Council, territorial rights to Earth and the surrounding solar system, and the responsibility to mediate disputes between other species. That's correct, Vex confirmed. They had given up the holographic disguise and now appeared as they truly were. A being that looked like someone had crossed an octopus with a nebula and given it a customer service job. Congratulations, Ambassador Martinez, but I didn't ask to be an ambassador. I don't even know what ambassadors do. I was just trying not to fail genetics. Yes, well, Blorg said from his new position as Jake's diplomatic aide. A job he'd accepted mostly because it came with better health insurance. That's very human of you. Solve galactic crises by accident. Complain about the paperwork. Lisa walked in carrying a stack of papers that seemed to exist in more dimensions than should be legally possible. She'd been appointed as Earth's Minister of Interspecies Affairs, which mostly meant she got to explain human behavior to confused aliens all day. Jake, we've got 17 new requests for mediation, she announced. Apparently, word has gotten out that humans can solve problems that have been stumping entire civilizations. There's a trade dispute between the Crystalline Confederacy and the Methane Collective, a territorial argument that's been going on for 3,000 years, and something called the Great Philosophical Debate of Sector 7. What's the philosophical debate about? Jake asked, though he suspected he didn't want to know. whether or not the color blue exists. Jake stared at her. They've been arguing about the existence of blue for 3,000 years? Apparently the Zenthari experience color differently than the Prism folk, and they can't agree on whether what humans call blue is actually a distinct color, or just a figment of primitive perception. Jake paused, trying to find words for the absurdity. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Of course blue exists. Look, blue. He pointed to his jeans. And that, Vex said with something that might have been pride, is exactly why you're perfect for this job. Humans have this remarkable ability to cut through complexity and get to the obvious solution that everyone else has been overthinking. Jake's phone buzzed with a text from his mom. Honey, I saw on the news that you're some kind of space diplomat now. That's nice, dear. Don't forget to eat vegetables. Love you. The weird part, Jake mused, is that this might actually be easier than college. At least when I solve galactic crises, people appreciate it. When I solve homework problems, I just get more homework. There is one small complication, Lisa said, looking at her interdimensional paperwork. It turns out that Earth's new status means we're responsible for maintaining galactic peace. If any major conflicts break out, it's our job to fix them. No pressure, Blorg added helpfully. Jake looked around his apartment, taking in the sight of alien dignitaries conducting interstellar business next to his pile of dirty laundry and his collection of empty energy drink cans. You know what the funny thing is? He said. 6 months ago, I thought my biggest problem was figuring out what to do with my life after graduation. Turns out, the answer was become the galaxy's unofficial problem solver and somehow prevent interstellar wars while maintaining a diet that consists primarily of caffeine and regret. Is that a problem? Vex asked. Jake cracked open a fresh energy drink and considered this. On one hand, he was now responsible for maintaining peace among 47 different alien species, most of whom had technologies that could destroy planets. On the other hand, he'd discovered that his seemingly useless college lifestyle was actually the perfect training for cosmic diplomacy. Nah, he said, taking a sip of his drink. This is fine. Besides, how hard could intergalactic diplomacy be? It's not like I have to solve the universe's problems or anything. His phone immediately rang with an incoming call from something called the Universal Peace Council. Ambassador Martinez, the voice on the other end said, "We have a situation. 2 entire galactic sectors are about to go to war over a disagreement about proper pizza toppings. We need your help." Jake looked at the phone, then at his friends, then at the growing pile of interdimensional paperwork on his desk. "You know what?" he said. "I always wanted a job where I could make a difference. I just thought it would involve more lab coats and fewer tentacles." He answered the phone. "This is Ambassador Martinez. Have you tried just ordering half and half and half?" And somehow that worked too. Because being human, it turned out, wasn't about being perfect. It was about being adaptably chaotic in a universe that had forgotten how to solve problems with creativity, caffeine, and the occasional stroke of accidental genius. Jake Martinez, professional procrastinator turned galactic ambassador, took another sip of his energy drink and got back to the business of keeping the universe from falling apart one ridiculous crisis at a time. After all, someone had to do it. And apparently that someone was him.